Visionaries is proud to present our 23rd season on public television. "25 years ago, as Ivan Gaylor flew over the Amazon with his daughter, he saw rainforests burning. Entire sections of lush forest had been torched, cut down and cleared away for timber, agriculture, and oil. The sight brought him to tears. One of the world's last great ecosystems was disappearing before his eyes. At that moment, Ivan decided to act. If not me, then who, he asked himself. Nature and Culture International was born of that question. If not me, then who? It was created from one man's determination to make a difference for the planet. But the organization grew and succeeded from another of Ivan's insights. Local and indigenous people are key to conservation success. Conservation must come from and support the local people who depend on these forests and the resources they provide. 20 years later, Nature and Culture International has protected more than 15 million acres of tropical forests and biodiverse ecosystems in South America and Mexico.
The variety of life on this planet sustains us. We get our clothes from it, our food from it, but mostly we get the connection to nature, where we came from. Because we are they. They meaning all the variety of life on this planet. And I think there's nothing more precious in the universe. When you walk in a forest, you may put your foot down on thousands of organisms at one time. The earth is alive.
When we eliminate the richness found in the original ecosystems, it impacts the likelihood that species will survive and thrive. We are all part of these ecosystems, and we don't escape the negative aspects when we start to lose species and access to natural resources. The Amazon, if you will, both in terms of the valleys, the mountains, and the coast, those are essentially the lungs of this planet. And just like a human body, if those lungs cease to exist, we very well could cease to exist.
Estos territorios son territorios muy frágiles. Sobre todo nos preocupa la amenaza con los proyectos mineros.
The mission of Nature and Culture is to protect the most biodiverse ecosystems on the planet, which is why we have focused on Latin America.
There is a lot of endemic species, species unique that only grow in this area.
Ecuador is about the size of Colorado, and it has 70% more bird species than all of North America. These ecosystems are packed. They are so biodiverse. There are millions of species on this planet, and the majority of them we have not even discovered yet. And so to lose biodiversity, which we are losing at an alarming rate, is losing something that we don't even fully comprehend. There may be a cure for cancer among the rainforest plants that we don't know about. And so losing that opportunity is a big loss for our species.
The variety of life on this planet is our greatest treasure. And we need those species for our survival and for our joy. What's it worth to save the orangutans? What would you pay to have your great-grandchildren know that the orangutans still are in the forest?
Desde los 90 Ecuador tiene una alta deforestación en la Amazonía. Alrededor de 20.000 hectáreas por año se deforestan en la cuenca amazónica ecuatoriana.
We know that these forests are carbon stores for the planet. And so when we cut the forest, not only does it not store it, it releases it. Everything that it stored, you chop it down and then it goes back into the atmosphere. That's just like our running cars, our airplanes. It's what's causing our climate to change, which is the crisis that we're in, the floods, the extreme temperatures and weather patterns that we're seeing.
La deforestación no para, por eso necesitamos actuar ya, rápido.
In terms of saving these forests, I think the short answer is to reduce deforestation. The slightly more complicated answer is to provide local peoples with alternatives that provide them with sources of revenue, with livelihoods, but in a more sustainable way.
We work with some indigenous communities. Shuar are the native Amazon people from the south region of Ecuador. And we started doing some activities that could provide profit to avoid logging or activities that could be negative to the environment.
Aquí tenemos una mujer Shuar. Utiliza tarat y es de color azul. Eso es una indicación de que tiene una convivencia directa con los seres misteriosos.
Nature and Culture has worked with the indigenous Shuar peoples on cultural tourism, and we have supported them with workshops, with tourism trainings.
If we want to protect nature, we need to work with local people. We find that most of them want to protect, but of course we live in all these countries are poor countries, and there is always a conflict between development and conservation, but we are trying to find a better relation between conservation and development. It's why we are trying to find some products, for example, from the natural ecosystems that could be used and could provide some profit for local people.
La cultura Shuar, nosotros así lo cultivamos en las huertas que los tenemos. Y tenemos variedades de yucas que cultivamos y variedades de algunas plantas.
We worked with a Shuar woman who was knowledgeable about the traditional practices, Shuar women growing traditional gardens, which are called ajas.
O sea, uno de esos nosotros lo hacemos, el surco que lo decimos, ve así. Así lo hacemos y lo sembramos como está.
Those practices were being lost by the community. These are multiple species gardens, so preserving agricultural biodiversity, they can have up to 100 species that are used for foods, for medicines, that have spiritual purposes. They also have a very light footprint on the land.
Los árboles que son maderables, eso no los tumban. Por ejemplo, ahí están los árboles, eso los dejamos.
We also have worked with the Shuar to title some of their ancestral lands in order to enroll them into conservation programs.
Culture is important because it preserves livelihoods and preserves traditions and helps us have a diversity of peoples on this planet. That's important. In ecology, the larger the system, the greater number of species, the greater its resilience is, and I think also its beauty. I think that's true with cultures as well.
Nosotros como Shuar, para ingresar en la cascada, antes de entrar tenemos que tomar un zumo de tabaco. Es como que le pedimos el permiso a la ruta de la cascada para poder ingresar.
Hace millones de años los sedimentos marinos provenientes del escudo guayanés se acumularon al pie de los Andes de Ecuador, especialmente en el sur de Ecuador, en mesetas como el Galápagos de la Amazonía. Es un archipiélago de areniscas en donde la evolución biológica ha explotado. Hay cientos de especies, muchas de ellas endémicas, que se han desarrollado en estos cañones, en estas mesetas.
This is the Andes, is the continental divide between the Pacific and the Atlantic. And this is the last connection between the Andes and the lowlands of the Amazon. This is why this area is very important because it's a natural corridor for plants and animals especially. If the lowlands will be warmer, then this species needs to move up to find a cooler weather because they are adapted to these warmer conditions. And it's why we think these biologists think that these altitudinal corridors are very, very important to preserve life. Yeah, it's the only way that they can protect from global warming.
Nature and culture is helping to preserve an intact corridor in the Nangaritsa Valley by purchasing land, by working with communities and the indigenous Shuar to put their lands into conservation areas, and working with governments to declare municipal reserves and expand national reserves. Nature and Culture is working with municipalities to enroll in a water trust fund which pools resources for conservation activities to preserve forests that provide drinking water.
Con NSI hemos trabajado en las dos fases. En la primera fase, la conservación de los bosques, recuperar áreas degradadas, con la gente, concientizarlos para que puedan almacenar la mayor cantidad de agua en la temporada lluviosa. Y la siguiente fase es en el buen aprovechamiento del agua, en la parte baja. Entonces tenemos aquí la vertiente y desde la vertiente empieza a manejarse el agua. Esta es la primera fase donde están aprovechando el agua. Una es para represarla y la otra es para producir peces. Y de aquí el agua comienza a repartirse y dependiendo de la cantidad de ellos les ha permitido incrementar su área de cultivo.
Ahora pues en la parte de paja de acá abajo ya tenemos bastantes plantas sembradas, tenemos plátano, yuca, árboles frutales, todo eso, y aquí ya podemos regar en las partes donde no había cómo regar antes. Esta es plantita de café y gracias al riego, a las lagunas que se ha construido, pues estas plantitas están así porque en el verano se las ha logrado regar todo el verano. Y este café pues de esta zona es súper rico.
Toda la zona seca se caracteriza por tener entre 3 y 4 meses de lluvia y luego 8 o 9 meses secos, completamente secos. Entonces, teníamos que ayudar a buscar alternativas que pueda permitir a los agricultores mantener sus cultivos y mantener sus economías familiares en esta temporada seca.
Lo que es también importante destacar es que antes que hacíamos toda esta recuperación de las lagunas, teníamos media hora de agua en la ciudad. Después que ya hicimos este trabajo, ya tuvimos casi las 12 horas de agua en la ciudad.
If you decide to pay for something, it's because you really believe that it's important and you are doing good, and it's a priority. For our economy, it's a lot of money. It's around, in average, 25% of the water bill that goes for conservation.
Igual se paga una tarifa baja de $1.25.
Through 2017, 12 municipalities have participated in the water fund, more than 350,000 acres protected as municipal reserves, and $3 million generated in revenues for conservation activities.
Estas alternativas están funcionando, la gente ha vuelto a creer en el campo y esto va a permitir el cuidado de la naturaleza y también incrementar los ingresos a las familias para que se queden en sus sitios.
NCI embodies my dream of conservation. It's a dream of a world more fecund with a variety of life that rewilds this planet and gives us an opportunity to live with the pleasures of nature more fully in our lives. That's my dream for humanity. In the early 90s, I'd been taking my daughter around to see the ecosystems in the world and what was left of them because I wanted her to know them, because you can't say what you don't know. And we had gone to Tierra del Fuego to look at the subantarctic rainforests, and we were on our way back, flying from Ushuaia over Brazil, and it seemed like all I saw were logging roads and forest fires at 35,000 feet at 500 miles an hour. It was so profound that I began crying because I realized that this was the last great ecosystem on the planet, and it was disappearing before my very eyes. It was right there. And at that moment, I concluded that if not me, then who?
Ivan was diagnosed more than a decade ago with Parkinson's disease. As his Parkinson's has progressed, he has needed to withdraw somewhat from the day-to-day activities of nature and culture. In his generosity of spirit, in the joy that he takes in the beauty of the world, he has really remained the soul of this organization. He buoys the people around him.
I'm lucky. Parkinson's taken a lot of my ability away from me, but it doesn't take the joy I see in hearing the news that a new reserve was created.
He's leaving a legacy, no matter what happens tomorrow, because of all the work that happened up to this day. The national parks, the biosphere reserves, all the protected areas, all the livelihoods that have been saved and kept and improved. So if nothing else happens, that legacy exists.
es una junta directiva de nuestra comunidad de Segunda y Cajas. Nuestra comunidad tiene más de 27,000 hectáreas, somos más de 5,000 comuneros. Nosotros representamos a todos ellos.
Estamos agradecidos, ¿no?, por obtener esa área de conservación, ya que contamos con una variedad de animales. Se encuentra al oso de anteojos, al gallito de las rocas, al coto mono, el tucán, diferentes variedades.
Nature and culture has helped the Segunda y Cajas community put their communal lands into protected status. And they felt that this was important because it gave them some safeguards against encroaching mining. The Segunda y Cajas region, the protected area, is the largest remaining cloud forest in Piura province. Cloud forests are extremely important high elevation ecosystems that capture moisture from the clouds, infiltrates into the ground, and then that water provides drinking water, irrigation water resources in the Andes and in the lowlands.
All the upper mountains have the upper catchments of the watershed for us. As Piura is a drier region, we need the water to maintain the valleys. This is the Huachumo village. This is in the middle of the forest where is the reserve. So up where the clouds are begins the reserve, and behind those mountains is all the cloud forests and the paramo ecosystems, what they are trying to protect. As you can see, all these areas where they live, what we are trying to do is to teach them better practices to raise the sugar cane and also support the transformation of this into a kind of brown sugar which is organic and which is sold to the European markets. As we need to protect the forest, we think that we need to make more productive the agricultural fields, but in less space, right?
Las capacitaciones que nos han venido dando han sido muy importantes, porque si ellos agarran y nos dicen acá hay un dinero efectivo, quizás lo gastamos y se acaba todo, pero lo que nos han dejado esas capacitaciones se quedan en la mente de cada uno de nosotros, y así venga quien venga, nadie nos va a poder quitar esas capacitaciones que hemos aprendido. Nosotros contamos con una organización que vendemos nuestra panela y nuestro café orgánico a países extranjeros, y ellos por vender nuestro producto orgánico nos pagan a un mejor precio. Pero ¿qué pasaría si el proyecto minero se da? Ya no podríamos vender nuestro producto, ya pasaría a ser un producto contaminado. Las mujeres, los niños, los hombres luchamos por una sola causa, y esa causa es para dejarles un ambiente sano y saludable a nuestros hijos, y por qué no decir a los hijos de nuestros hijos.
Lo que ellos ahora están haciendo resume el pensamiento del fundador de NSI, ¿no? Iván Geiler, que dice que este es el mejor momento para ser conservacionista, ¿no? Y es lo que aquí podemos ver, ¿no? Que si no hacemos algo ahora, en este momento, esto se puede perder y en algunos pocos años ya no tener nada. Entonces ahora la idea es asegurar la conservación de los bosques y del páramo.
It's going away so fast that I think we have to do triage on what we save.
There's been a number thrown out for the last handful of years that we've got anywhere from 10 to 20 years left. Nobody knows exactly what that means, But I think it's pretty clear to those of us involved in the work that with each passing day that we don't expand our efforts, things are lost. This work might be the most valuable thing any of us can do. We want to have a safe world, we want to have a thriving world, and we want to have a beautiful world.
My vision for the future is in 20 years we can look back and feel confident that we did everything we could to save those critical ecosystems, not for just the people living there, but for all of us.
There is no they. Only you and I can save the forest. And together we can. For the Visionaries, I'm Sam Waterston.
Visionaries is brought to you through the generosity of Alice Rosenwald Fund, the Rick and Nancy Moskowitz Foundation, Winkler Family Foundation, St. Joseph's Indian School, the Ferry Family Charitable Foundation, Episcopal Diocese of Western Massachusetts, Bill and Helen Close Charitable Fund B, Boston Private, Jonathan and Janie Kravitz, Lori A. Martin and Christopher Eisgruber, Mintz Levin, Open Society Foundations, the San Francisco Foundation, Watchell Lipton Rosen and Katz, First Hawaiian Bank, American Savings Bank, Central Pacific Bank, and Bank of Hawaii, as well as Beth and Brian Levine, Danielle and Eric Mandelblatt, Kara and Scott Friedman, Surdna Foundation, Diane and Charles Smith, Elizabeth Moore, John H. Beisner, KLM Foundation, Pilgrims, the Biela Foundation, the California Endowment, Wayne and Debbie Maycomber, with additional support by the following.